Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Foundry virtual events. Really excited to be here today. We have Courtney Pryce here. Courtney used to work with us at Foundry, and he's one of our amazing freelancers in London. You'll hear all about Courtney's journey soon. I also have my colleague Chris Weatherly here today. Chris is going to help us with the Q&A, answer all those burning Nuke questions you have along with Courtney. We're going to be throwing you some polls. We have questions at the end. What's going to happen is we're going to play a short video. Then we're going to play Courtney's Skill Up. The video, Courtney's presentation is in video format, only because of bandwidth issues, but we're here live and we'll be answering the chat as well as questions afterwards. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Cheers.
Next slide. I'll do it quick. Sorry, my slide is not working. Emma, could you fast forward the slide? Oh, dear. And there goes my internet. Can you hear me? Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can still hear me, at least Courtney can hear me. So our Foundry virtual events, it's been a month, we realized today. We've been doing them for 30 days. I think we've done 8 or something crazy like that. We've been doing 2 a week. We're still working out the schedule, but we're hoping you're enjoying them. There's a full list of what we're doing in the next couple of weeks coming up, and we're going to be doing more. So we'd love you to join us. We have a series of presentations in June. We're working on a little bit like a trade show with some great customer work. So stay tuned. It's all posted on our events page. And one thing we want to remind everybody is now's a great time for you to try our Foundry products. We've reset all of our trials to 0. So if you want to try Nuke for 30 days or Katana or Mari, now's a great chance. Let's see if I can slide. I can do it, yes. I also want to let you guys know there's a lot of content that's been posted just recently for the Nuke family of products that we will hope you guys get a chance to see. There's 5 new articles in our Insights Hub on our website. We talked to Weta about Gemini Man. We talk about real-time conference. We talk about some great stuff, including virtual production. There's 5 great articles on Nuke Studio included, so go there and take a look. We have some more webinars coming up, again, targeting around the compositing world. We have a Nuke TD panel on Thursday, which is going to prove to be exciting with Digital Domain, Saddington, Baines, Cinesite, and Method Studios. We have a VFX Soup panel next week where we have folks from MPC and Technicolor, as well as Framestore and others who will be talking about their role as VFX supervisors, Nuke Studio for small business, and lots more to come. So please keep an eye out, sign up for the ones that interest you, and we hope to see more of you there. We just released a really cool Foundry Learn project that I need to call out because Shahin Tusi is one of our speakers on our VFX supervisor panel. He just did this great piece on face morphing with Nuke X, so you should definitely take a look at that if that's up your alley. Little reminders, we have some great industry partnerships that are really important to us. So for those of you out there who are part of Access VFX, thank you. Access VFX is an organization based in the UK with branches in the States where they help mentors and mentees meet and help guide people through their journey in their VFX career. So I highly suggest you take a look at it. If you're a developer out there, please take a look at some of the work the Academy Software Foundation is doing on open source, including a lot of tools that we depend on at Foundry for Nuke, Katana, and Mari. So there's lots out there. So if you're on the developer side, please take a look at ASWF. If you want to help out with the open source stuff, they're always looking for talent. And finally, just because this is a new call, and if anyone's out there looking for a job, we have a couple of jobs open for both VFX artists and engineers. So feel free to take a look at foundry.com careers and see if there's anything out there that interests you. With that, I'm going to stop talking and introduce my call. Oh, nope, I did it again. With that, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to play a really quick video for you about Foundry Nuke.
We can imagine working on VFX without Nuke. I don't think any other software has this impact in the industry. The combination of having very strong native tools and then the possibility to customize it in the way you need it, I think that's something that makes it so unique.
Nuke is ubiquitous to every visual effects studio. All compers either do know how to use Nuke or should know how to use Nuke. When you're close up on Daenerys flying on Drogon's back, and there are particles flying by and wisps of cloud whipping past her, that's all done in Nuke.
It's a core way that we can bring things like smoke, embers, dust, affecting and interacting with a character, creating realism. Developing those composites in a three-dimensional sense is core. And without those three-dimensional tools, it would be vastly more difficult.
I was a supervisor at the time where we picked up Nuke Studio, and it was so nice to just pick up a tool that has all of that. I mean, it has a timeline, it has all the basic features that we needed, and just be able to use that right away. That was amazing. And once you start to expand upon it, it becomes just evident that there is no alternative to it.
Nuke is just a really powerful tool in that you can generate very complicated templates and scripts, and then Nuke has a lot of tools for boiling those down into gizmos, turning those into plugins. So every little unique aspect of the show, we would develop a tool. So the artist didn't have to learn a large set of scripts and templates. It was really a tool set that they could learn and then carry that through the rest of the show. And that's really powerful.
The tools that make the biggest difference are tools like the camera tracker and the model builder. Those types of tools are time saving and they work. And I've seen them attempting to work in other software and not working.
I love how close my software is to the one of my artists. I love that I can jump from Nuke Studio into Nuke at any given moment, give feedback, write up scripts, jump back into Nuke Studio. I don't think any other software could do that for me currently.
Nuke Studio is a massive string to our bow. We can compete with this workflow. We win work because of it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you to all those Nuke customers who shared their experience. And with that, I'm going to pass this over to my colleague, Chris Weatherly.
Hey everyone, welcome to this webinar on becoming a senior compositor. My name is Chris Weatherly, obviously, and I'm an associate product manager at Foundry on the Nuke team. I really just wanted to take this opportunity to give a quick update on the Nuke family just before we jump into Courtney's amazing talk. So these are strange times, but one thing that's been really positive for us on the Nuke team is that we're actually close to working at full capacity, all remotely and all from home, so in a safe manner, which has been fantastic to see how the team's adapted to that. And we've even managed to get out our first remote release, which was 12.1 v2. So we're really trying to make sure that we can continue providing updates to users and supporting people still trying to get work out or still trying to learn. So as Jen said, we set our trial period. So if you're looking to get in on a trial of Nuke, or you've had a trial previously but wanted to look at it again, then this is a great opportunity to access and have a play again with the latest builds. We're also, looking at how we can still continue to develop. So we do have alphas and betas currently ongoing for the normal programs. And we're really looking for feedback from people. So if you have the means to go in and test, then that'd be great. Especially the one caveat we do have to our current work is that we don't have access to the hardware we used to. So it's things like high DPI and HDR. So if you have that kind of hardware and can help with the testing, that's always massively appreciated. Also for everyone working or trying to figure things out at the moment, our support team is still operational. So if you are having issues while you're working remotely, or if you've just had issues or problems that you've encountered at work before that you never previously had time to report, now's a fantastic time to let us know, because we can't really fix what we don't know, and you'd be surprised by what people don't report because they assume it's already been reported. That's really all I wanted to give you an update on the Nuke team. So from that, I just want to stay safe, stay healthy yourself. And as this is a pre-recorded, just know that that's for internet purposes, for quality purposes, but there is a Q&A at the end. So please do provide your questions in the chat. We have a questions tab specifically for questions, and chat just for everyone to keep up to date with each other. I do have my colleague, Jessie Burgess. She's a CS on the team, and she will also be helping to moderate the chat. So feel free to introduce yourselves, put out any questions you want answered at the end. And with that, I'm looking forward to hearing Courtney's talk. So Courtney, why don't you take it away?
All right, how you doing, guys? Yeah, so my name is Courtney Pryce. You know what? Maybe firstly, actually, I want to say thank you to the Foundry for inviting me to do this. Yeah, it's quite an interesting topic, and it's a big one. So I've tried to condense it and not waffle too much. So hopefully there's some nuggets of information in there that's going to be helpful to anybody trying to make that transition. So yeah, maybe I'll just let you guys run the video, watch the video, and then we can talk afterwards. Hello and welcome to today's TED Talk on COVID-19 and social distancing. Now that's a joke. My name's Courtney Pryce and I'm a freelance Nuke artist. Today we're going to be talking about becoming a senior compositor and what I personally think are important things to help you with that journey. Off the bat, as a bit of a disclaimer, I'd like to say there's no real special shortcut route or 5 to 10 skills that I can show you or talk to you about that will qualify you as a senior compositor. In fact, the term's a bit arbitrary. It's not like accounting or other industries where you can pass a course and get a certificate and be accredited by a body that says you are now at that grade or band. So a senior at ILM might have a different skill set to a senior at Lola VFX. But that being said, I personally do think there are some common skills or traits that I've noticed over the years that I think are consistent with most senior artists. And I think those are the things that I'm going to try and highlight in this presentation, and hopefully that will help you on your journey making that transition from mid to senior. Firstly, let me give you a brief rundown of my last 15 years of working history. 2005, last summer of uni, got myself a job in London as a runner for a company called TV Set. They had a sister company called Concrete. There I learnt about grading, telecine, linear, non-linear editing, TV standards, PAL 4.3 anamorphic era before HD. In 2006, my friend Ursula got me a job at Big Boy, which is a small boutique post-production company, a sister company to Smoke and Mirrors. Started off as a runner, worked my way up to Avid Assistant, Flame Assistant. This is going through the HD digital Red Raw era. My boss Jim Allen got me into FX PhD tutorials and got me a copy of Shake, which I learned using the Ron Brinkman Art of Digital Compositing and also the Shake tutorials generally. 2009, I put a showreel together. Got a job at Deluxe Digital London as a digital artist, working with Russ Weatherall. No more running, and now I'm in the film world learning about versioning and working on title sequences and film inserts, films like Pelham 123, 2012, Priest, Zombieland, Avatar, A-Team, G.I. Joe, that sort of stuff. So reversioning those for France, Russia, Italy, Germany and Spain territories. Here I'm learning about film scanning, cinema color spaces, so your P3, XYZ, your digital cinema packages, and we're mainly using Combustion, After Effects and Cinema 4D. Around this time we was trialing Fusion, Toxic and Nuke, but because of my FX PhD background and Shake, background with Shake, I picked up Nuke. 2011, the opportunity came to work for the Foundry. My old boss, Patrick Jocelyn, hired me as the third creative specialist in the London office, working alongside some talented guys, Matt Breedy and Naz Parker. Stayed there for 5 years, soaked up all the knowledge that, you know, met some really great people, saw the company grow, and, you know, really enjoyed my time there, but reached the point where I needed a new challenge. And in 2016, I decided to set up my own company, XIVFX Limited, and become a freelancer, landing my first role at the Mill through Pete Hodgman, and worked on a few projects there and haven't looked back since. And here's a quick show reel showing some of the shots I've been working on over the last few years. So here's a quick snapshot of some of the companies and projects I've worked on since freelancing. I've got a decent client base of companies that I work with, partly due to my contacts or the people that I've met through the Foundry, but there's a decent spread of projects that I've worked on since over the last 4 years, from commercials to episodic to film, live action to the animation, full CG. There's not much different types of compositing that I haven't had an opportunity to touch or work on yet. So these last 4 years has given me a rounded view of VFX as an industry. So day one, you're in the industry and you walk into the office and they're calling you a junior artist. I mean, I'm not really big on titles, but it is a very important way of being able to differentiate who does what type of work or who's able to do what type of work, you assume, or even, just even figuring things out like pay. So one thing as like a general rule, I would say junior artists are expected to have some type of formal training, whether be it university, a dedicated VFX school or course. You're probably expected to have a entry-level basic show reel showing that you're proficient in your software. Again, I doubt many people are expecting it to be amazing, but something is better than nothing, right? And it's usually going to be your first role. So again, not a wealth of experience expected. And it's widely accepted that you're going to need supervision. I prefer to call it mentoring, but you're going to need help to get the majority of the tasks completed. So then after that, you've been a junior for a period of time, hopefully not too long, providing your company's got a good progression system. And now you are a midweight artist. A midweight artist is probably the broadest level and the skill sets can range the widest, I'd say. But generally, if you're a midweight artist, I'd say you've got a decent amount of experience. It's demonstrable in some type of show reel or portfolio. You're expected for less supervision, mentoring, and you'll probably be able to handle and tackle most art tasks on your own. So now you've been knocking about for a bit and you've got a few more grey hairs on your face and you're considered a senior artist. Generally speaking, most senior artists have got a wide range of experience, solid working history. Most of the senior reels I've seen have got a wide variety of shots at differing levels of complexity. They're typically not going to need any supervision or mentoring. There's always going to be nuances, whatever company you work for, or new technique that needs to get passed down. But typically it will start at the seniors and then they would filter that information down to mentoring and coaching through tasks to help the team, get to a standard or a level that is that everybody's happy with. So that can't be overlooked as a skill set. So now to the $1 million question and the reason why you guys are still here. How do you make that transition from a midweight artist to a senior? I like to think there's 3 components to that question. The first is experience, which can be defined a couple ways, but I'll go into that in a minute. But also, I think a good and strong balance of hard and soft skills. What do I mean by that? So with hard skills, we're specifically talking about your technical ability, whereas soft skills is more the type of skills that are harder to define, but relate more about your emotional intelligence and how well you work in a group and your social skills. So when I say experience is an important part of making that transition, most people might just think that's time. It's not necessarily specific to time. You can become senior through time and length of service. But I personally also think there's working on a variety of shots can help speed up your progress to that senior level. The more difficult shots you tackle and execute, the more experience you gain. And you might be able to do that in a shorter space of time. I personally think commercials has been a great ground for me to experience that and just tackling loads of different types of shots. On the other side of the coin, you could work in the film world where complexity and technical precision is probably more of a focus. And in that sense, you can gain more experience along that path as well. I do find episodic work tends to be a good medium between the two worlds. Now let's develop some of these ideas a bit more and get into some specifics of what I would call hard and soft skills. This is not extensive and not applicable to everyone or every company, but they're things that I think are important to note and, have in the back of your mind. I do when I'm working. So in the hard skills side of things, technical diligence. How well are you checking your work? Non-destructive workflow. Are you maintaining the quality of the material provided as best as you can? Procedural. Do you have a procedure that helps you tackle every shot? Keeping it simple. I took this from the Michael Ralla School of Thought. We went on a trip out in Korea for the Foundry, and one thing he highlighted was, is your work more complicated than it needs to be? Is there an easier, more reproducible way of working? Speed versus efficiency. Fast isn't always the best approach. On the soft skills side of things, communication. Got to remember, it's a team game. Are you clear in your instructions? Are you good at explaining your methods or ideas? Know your role. Can you step into any company and still be effective as you are in your current company? This one I learned early in my career from Colin Sumption at Big Boy. Solutions, not problems. Are you a creative in your problem solving just as much as you are in producing images? Interpersonal. How well do you work with the immediate people around you? There's no point being a great artist if you're no fun to work with. Integrity. What are your values? How strongly will you stick to them, and will those values benefit the project or hinder them? So these are the kind of things that I think are worth taking note of and bearing in mind when you're progressing through your career. And I definitely, even today, I still consider all of these factors. All right, so if you guys are still with me at this point, you're doing great. Thanks for sticking it out. But now we're going to get into a couple examples demonstrating some of the points I've made with the hard skills side of things. Side note, I had way too much fun finding GIFs for this presentation, so there's more to come. Right, so the golden checklist of integration. This is a concept that I learned back in 2012 using a Nuke FX PhD course run by Eren Deneur. Simple checklist of like 10 points that you kind of need to address when you're integrating shots, and just bear in mind. And it's good to kind of reinforce these. I know most of you probably already do it, but just to reinforce it, you're looking at things like your context, perspective, tracking, your color, your sharpness, and your grain management. I'll show a couple examples of each of these. Bear in mind, I'm using my Bali holiday footage, and I've had to comp these shots in a couple of evenings and weekends. So let's not critique it too much. It's more about the concepts. Okay, so context, first things first. You need to look at the element that you're inserting, whether it's in the correct context. Take this beach shot, for example. You know, you've got this wooden, so the source plate has a wooden lounger in here. This is my reference. But if I insert this harshly lit IKEA desk, no matter how much I try, it's not going to fit to the image. If I then take another stock image that's been sunlit, like this hand sanitizer bottle, for example, again, it's not going to work because hand sanitizer is not going to be in the middle of the beach at that size. Doesn't look correct. But if I find a sunlit wooden bench, something similar to this, you're going to have a better time comping it and instead of fighting the image. So when you're inserting these things, have that in mind. Does it fit for the image? Am I going to end up wrestling the footage rather than finding something that is a bit more suited for the shot? And it's the same thing for perspective. If you get the correct perspective of your stock footage or whatever it is that you're comping, you're already 80% of the way there. And then you can use like corner pins, grid warps and spline warps to help you shoehorn it into the correct perspective. For tracking, when you first see a shot, knowing whether it's better to stabilize the plate or to match move an element in place is always good to have mapped out in the back of your mind. When a shot is going to be better used for camera tracking, or maybe it's vector warping that you need. But typically the first steps you should be trying to do is denoise your plate, get rid of that grain as best as you can. I personally still use the Nuke default denoiser with the temporal setting on the denoiser, and if I crank it up to something like 10 and keep preserve edges checked, I can get pretty good results without destroying fine detail. So I'll typically do that, and then I'm going to want to undistort my image. The tracking elements from further from the center will reduce the accuracy. So you need to be undistorting your plates and then introducing distortion onto the elements as you comp them in. If you're still finding the tracks difficult, there's things like, you can it's all about contrast in your image, really. So if you can grade your image, you can use Pixel Fudge's bandpass tool, or you can key the Luma or one of the channels maybe and get a good contrast out of that. Or even if you've had roto supplied to you, sometimes I've had to just track the roto that has been done by eye, frame by frame. Vector warping typically works best on organic materials such as clothes. Faces and things that deform, have lots of deformations in them. The new Nuke 12 grid warp tracker now exports 2D tracking data for you to extract XY translations from, so that's super good. There's also keyframe tracking in the 2D tracker to help get accurate tracks in when things get occluded, or be able to refine tracks. I personally still use Vidya Harvey's model builder node inside a Nuke to get axes points that haven't been picked up in the camera tracker. So when the camera tracker creates its points, if there's a point in an area of interest that I can't get, instead of using the points to 3D, I throw in a model builder node, add an axis, make 2 keyframes, and then snap the axes to that point. So in Nuke, there's like loads of methods to do tracking and get better at tracking. I haven't got time to go through them all, but definitely worth investigating, looking at, and seeing, and basically building your own little repertoire of how best to tackle troublesome shots. All right, so for the next step in your golden list of integration, we're going to look at color, and that's broken into like 3 subcategories. You're looking at your light, you're looking at your atmosphere, and you're looking at the contextual lighting. So first, the light itself. So matching the light to the scene. Whenever you get an element, or this is the process I do anyways, and I think it's quite a good procedure to bear in mind. It's fairly easy, but with the grade node, I only really use 3 grade nodes to start off with, just to get it into the ballpark of where my destination image is, or the color values in my destination image. So looking at this slice tool, just as a quick reminder, it might be redundant information, but it's always good to get a refresher. But the grade node, the black point and the white point only move the black and white values. That is the same as the lift, the gain, and the multiply. The gain and the multiply basically work as a primary and secondary color correction idea. The offset lifts the whole image, all the values in the image, and the gamma only deals with the midpoints. So typically when I get an element, whether it's CG, stock footage, or still, what I would do is I'll set my black and white points by sample picking. Then I would add in another grade node underneath that, and I would then use my lift and gain values and map those to the values, the black and white points in the source image that I'm trying to comp to. So I'll use those values there. And then I would add another grade node underneath that and only play with the gamma values to then maybe increase the gamma in case, depending on what gamma curve was baked into the footage. And also I might start breaking apart the RGB values, so I'm not moving my black and whites, but I'm just kind of playing with the tonality of the image. The reason why I kind of do that 3-step grade process is because with the grade node, there's they all concatenate and it's non-destructive. So if I add in the reverse of all of those operations underneath and click the reverse button, I can get back to the original image without any any loss of data. So I think it's always good to do those first 3 grade nodes as a starting point, and then I'd add any color corrects or any other color correction nodes after that, because those are harder. Those ones do, once you start breaking apart your shadows and your midtones and your highlights, then those are destructive workflows. You can't really reverse those back into the original image. So as a process, set up those 3 grade nodes, and then after that, I'm 70%, 70-80% of the way there. Then I need to look at my atmosphere in my image. Do I need to add, where I'm adding this element, do I need to add haze? Do I need to add fog? Was it raining? Was it wet? Do I need to, increase the highlight pings? And then the last one is the contextual. Where is the light direction in the scene? Do I need to add a wash of light to my image just to kind of make it sit in? Maybe also shadows. Without the shadows, it's not going to look right. It's not going to sit in right. Sample the shadow values from another element in the scene and grade the background so that it matches. So once you've got your colors in the right place, you now need to move on to the lens and camera characteristics. In this section, you're looking at your sharpness, and we've got 3 subcategories. Again, you're looking at your focal, your motion, and your contextual. So firstly, your focals, like your depth of field, you got defocus, you got Z defocus, you got convolve, all those tools there to help you recreate that lens effect or that bokeh effect. And I'd suggest downloading a tool by Kieran Bishop called bokeh builder, and it's free to download on his website. I use it all the time, and you can recreate that interesting lens effect as using these tools and building them together, building a kernel together. So also you're looking at chromatic aberration at this stage. You want to be looking at the split of the RGB values as it goes to the edge of the lens, replicating what the glass would do. Motion blur. Again, you're looking, typically you're probably going to be using a transform, turning on the motion blur knob in the transform node. Your shutter values are going to be like 0.5, which is 180 degrees shutter angle. 0.25 would be your 90 degrees. Then you pretty much want to be adding your transform node to the motion blur 2D node, and that will generate your motion vectors, and you can add a vector blur after that to then add your motion blur in there. Again, contextual is more so what's going on in the shot. So there could be a focus pull, there could be a shallow depth of field, there could be vignetting, anamorphic stretching, all those kind of things that might need to get replicated in order to make the elements sit in the shot better. And then finally, there's grain management. There are a lot of tools out there that automatically grain footage, but I find understanding the process is usually good enough and will help you get out of trouble when your supervisor sends your shot back to you for the 6th time saying the grain's not quite right yet. So my technique is that I use a checkerboard, and I put the black and I make the boards black and white, the actual squares black and white, shuffle that into alpha, key mix it with the denoise plate, and then I basically compare where the grain is. I'll compare areas where the grain is and where the grain isn't, and basically I'll get an intersection that's quite interesting. So say like my midtones. So firstly I'm looking at the size of my grain as a default, and then I'm kind of balancing the midtones in the red, green and blue channels just so that I'll get a good starting point. Then after that, I'll kind of go into another section of the image where it's quite dark, and then I'm going into the black section of the grain, and I'm tweaking those values, and I'm doing those in the RGB values. Okay. After I've got that, and then I'm doing a bit of a balancing act between the darks and the mids. Once I'm happy with that, then I'll use a luma key and use that to control the fall off of the grain in the highlight areas, because it's going to be less visible or less responsive in those areas than it would be in the darks. When I've got the image into a pretty happy space, and I'm checking all around the image at this point, so all the highlights, all the midtones, all the darks, and making sure it's pretty consistent, and I'm happy with the grain I've got, then what I would do is I would add that and the luma key to a 50% gray constant, and the luma key is going to work as a mask of the in the grain tool itself. So you apply through the alpha, and then I might add a color correct afterwards to desaturate the grain. Sometimes you need to do that, and then I'm going to overlay this over the footage, and control the mix. Maybe I don't need a full 100% overlay. Maybe it's got to be a 70% or something like that. But generally, that's my graining technique. And another point to kind of add is that I only ever add the grain to the elements that I'm adding. So even though I might denoise the plate, I would then reintroduce the grained footage and use a key mix and take a different key of the elements that I've actually changed and use that to only grain that part of the image rather than everything. So you've completed your comp now, and part of your due diligence, technical diligence, is that you're going to do your own tech check process before sending it off to your supervisor, and he's going to do his tech check process, which is going to be a bit more thorough. So here's a couple of things that you can do yourself. So firstly, once you've finished your comp, check your RGB values. Your RGB channels, sorry, check those individually. Gamma up and gamma down. So when you gamma up and gamma down, make sure that all of your elements that you've added respond the same way to the other elements in the image. Saturation, so at the bottom of your tree, add like a double the saturation and make sure that all of them color correct in the same way. So if any harsh color corrections get done in post or in the finishing, then it will all respond correctly. Reformat and crop at the end of the tree. Always make sure that those bounding boxes are taken care of and the format is the correct delivery format. I always do a difference key between the before and after the comp, so that I'm only ever key mixing in the elements that I've changed. So the plate pretty much remains undisturbed, but then the elements are the parts that are actually coming through. So add in a difference keyer, boost up the values, maybe erode those, smooth out the edges, and use the key mix to combine that back into the plate. And then also, if you're doing versions or you're addressing notes, it's always good to do an old versus new comparison. So maybe bring in the old and the new comp, do a difference, merge them together, do a difference between the two, and make sure that that you've only changed what's been asked of you and nothing else has gone wrong. As mentioned before, keep it simple. When you're comping, definitely try your hardest not to overcomplicate it. One of the strongest selling points of Nuke is the collaboration aspect part of it. The fact that you can work in teams and people can share each other's scripts. Everything is pretty much laid out, or the UI of Nuke is laid out in a way that is supposed to make it uniform and easy to read. There's color coding on things, there's elbows to create right angles, you can do backdrop nodes, that sort of stuff. So when people go against that, it almost loses the benefit of why Nuke is powerful. So for me, keep scripts neat and spaced out. I use a really good tool from Walter Gilsing from Nukepedia that basically aligns nodes. So you basically grab a bunch of nodes, whether they're horizontally or vertically, and the last selection, the last item in that selection, if you press Alt and up, it will snap to the up, the topmost or the last, the horizontal level of the last node. It's really easy to kind of keep your scripts neat and right angles and stuff like that. Sometimes you get into spiderweb messes, and it just takes that much more longer to debug and find the problems. Generally, top to bottom, input to output, your reads go in the top, your writes go out the bottom. Then you want to go left to right. So for me, all my elements coming from the left hand side, and sometimes I've got to make a big loop to do that, but regardless, my elements will always be coming in from the left hand side, similar to how the merge node is written, A merged over B. It's left to right. And then all my mats feed into the right hand side of the node, coming from the right hand side into the main branch. So again, all the mask inputs go inside there, and the key mix go inside there. So that is super important in terms of just being able to read it and understand what's being done where. And that way, if you have those kind of consistencies, like, you know, everybody that picks up your work should be able to troubleshoot it, get in there, fix it, or add anything to it, and it wouldn't be a problem being able to retrace steps. Last point, procedurals, not just about the nodes, the nodes concatenating, or the fact that there's a flow of the information. It's about you yourself and having a process, or kind of like a strategy from A to B. Just generally, last couple pointers on keeping it simple is, don't be this guy, be this guy. Like, I know exactly who I'd prefer to pick up a script from. And again, in a more extreme example, you know, don't be this guy, be this guy. So it's Nuke, literally organization and keeping things simple and clean and, you know, neat and tidy is one of the strengths of Nuke, and I'd highly recommend you using that as part of your process when you're working. Okay, so speed versus efficiency, they're not necessarily the same thing. Being able to finish shots in a short space of time might be good for roughing out, but for the purpose of iterations and reducing the amount of reproducing of setups and workflows, it's better to be efficient and plan out your approach. It might take a bit longer in the initial stages, but if you, with the foresight, it will help speed up things as things get a bit more hectic towards the end. A while back, I learned from Raphael Ham in a Nuke presentation that he done for the Foundry about the concept of keeping your own cookbook recipe as a tool set that you can use. And if you find any cool tools or procedures or gizmos, you store them here for future reference. And it's something that I've been doing for ages now. And here's like a version where, you know, I've got them in backdrop nodes as grouped nodes rather than registered gizmos, so I can open them in any Nuke script. The idea is that I don't ever need to recreate another normals relighting or position map key or a de-spill tool. I've got something here, a tool here that I can use quite quickly and carry on with the rest of the project. Doug's Curve Creator, I use this all the time for like camera shakes, pipe it, create two of them, link one to the X value and to the Y, and control those, the bounce or the curve that's generated from it. I already spoke about Kieran's bokeh builder. Another really good one is Rob Bannister's edge tool, useful for extending edges and blending in with the background. You can use it in intermediate mode as well, so you can kind of break it apart and bring in your keys, your alphas separately, and start, you know, patching in edges. It's very useful for like green screen keying or rebuilding edges. PXF filler is a good one that I used to use a lot. Straight, you know, you kind of throw in a node and you paint in your area, and it kind of fills in the area that you're making where the hole is. But I picked up a tip or a technique from Ludwig Haley recently when I was working on an ASDA project, where it's a better way, I think, of creating clean gradients. You create little masks, or you create a mask around the area you want to fill in. You pre-mult that, so now you've just got the color values, and you blur those, so you know you extend the alpha to, you know, as far as possible, and then you unpremult it, which will extend the RGB values to the edge of the blurred alpha, and then you're gonna be able to see a nice gradient, and the blur controls how much that gradient happens. After that, you just need to use a roto paint node just to reveal through to the clean background. Very useful, and it's probably replaced my pixel filler technique now, the tool that I use there. But the community sharing these tools is another strength of Nuke, and it allows you to focus less on the technicalities of these tools and more on the creativity. Also, as a freelancer, I've got a .nuke directory that I keep on a shared Google Drive location. It has all my user settings, menu.py, custom scripts, tool sets. And if I'm at a company that allow me to download this folder, I'll have a word and just say, look, I've got my settings. It will allow me to get up to speed quicker. If I can download that, then what I will do is just put in I'll put in the plugin path just to find out where the locations are being registered in terms of where my user Nuke directory is. I will then go in there and create an init.py and add nuke.add plugin path command with the location of where that folder has been downloaded to, and restart Nuke, and those settings should register and allow me to be up and running without having to configure every single time I'll go to a new company. So those are little tips that might help you be a bit more efficient and also work faster. So that's the hard skills out of the way. Now we're going to switch track onto the more softer, warmer, fuzzier skills that generally I think is the difference between a mid and a senior. These are the things that you will develop as the more experience you get. As Justice, age 11, from Sugar Hill, Georgia, says, communication is key in any team challenge. Don't be afraid to ask questions when you're working on a project. Talk to your colleagues. Make sure you are clear on instructions. And if not, let it be known. Ask for regular feedback, whether it be from a junior, mid or senior. This game's all about iterations. It's rare VO1 is good enough to go, so get as many eyes on it as possible. When mentoring, be as clear and concise as possible. Don't be as long-winded as this presentation. As an extension from the feedback, be open to constructive criticism. Make sure it is constructive though, through asking questions and being clear on what is needed to fix it. Another point, when you're keep an ear out for conversations in the room. It's easy to put on headphones and tune out, but also you need to be aware of some of the conversations in the room, as you may be able to lend a hand or make an invaluable suggestion. And banter, man, make sure you have fun. You're working on these projects for a lengthy period of time and it's hard work. Lighten the mood once in a while is good for morale. In the wise words of Dwayne Johnson, know your role. Understand what is being required of you when you start a job, and if possible, try to get the brief before so there's no surprises on day one. Knowing when to lead. Some companies might not have the expertise to lead on a project and will look to you as the senior for help with that. Should be confident enough to step into that role. Knowing when to follow. Maybe there's already a couple senior artists on the project and you don't want to add to the cooks in the kitchen. So be willing to take the back seat and let somebody else drive. Also knowing when to mentor. There may be some cases when you've not been asked to supervise or mentor, but it's the right thing to do to help someone on their journey, as you know, as you may have or may have liked to have had on yours. Don't be shy to pay the gesture forward, and overall be adaptable. As Bruce Lee said, be water. One of the best things about being a freelancer for me is constantly being out of my comfort zone, and that makes things interesting. Should embrace those challenges and take them head on. Yep, solutions, not problems. This was a lesson I learned very early in my career. Problem solving is a characteristic of most VFX artists. It's a part of the creative process, and more often than not, non-technical people or people in management positions are less interested in the technicalities and more about what their options are. When problems arise, remain calm, remain positive. I often say in jest that we're not saving babies or rescuing kittens here. So try not to get too stressed out, and definitely don't take the problem home with you when you leave work. Typically, if there's a problem, try to offer 2 to 3 solutions. Let the decision maker make the final call, but offer up your opinion and a couple of approaches to solving it. Be helpful. Even when it's not your problem, you can offer a solution. Get involved, help out. It's good karma points. And be fallible. Sometimes the problems are caused by ourselves or something we've done. Don't be too precious to admit it, and just take responsibility in fixing it. Interpersonal. I actually think this is one of the most important soft skills. Being interpersonal, man. Be the type of person people want to have around and want to work with. You could be the most talented artist, but if you're difficult to work with, all that talent probably isn't worth the effort. People work with who they like. So help to create that nice environment that everybody likes to work in. Be approachable and go out your way to build rapport. Go to the pub, have a drink, man. Overall, be nice. It really isn't that hard. And luckily, most artists in this industry generally are nice. So just make sure you're one of the nice ones as well. And integrity. As a soft skill, I think this one's pretty important, and something I've only personally realized in the last few years. It's very easy to do work for the greater good and be helpful to a fault. but you also need to make sure that it's a two-way street, and whether you're working for is reciprocating that effort or at least appreciative of it. We all do it early in our careers when we go above and beyond for little to no rewards. Making that transition from mid to senior, you need to ensure that you're being true to yourself and getting something out of the work that you're doing. It could be financial reasons, creativity or development, but you should know deep down and be honest with yourself what it is you're trying to achieve. And it's not just working for somebody else's gratification. So that kind of leads on to the next point. Be honest. Sometimes there's a task that you can't do or you're struggling to do. Don't be ashamed to admit it. It happens. It happens to the best of us. It's humbling, but it's a part of the game as well. Be honest and upfront. It's a good sign of professionalism. Another aspect of professionalism is not letting people down. And I should specify intentionally, because sometimes you might do it accidentally, but if you've arranged to join a job, don't change your mind at the last minute. And again, that goes for employers, but you know, I'm speaking to the compositors directly now. If you've been given a deadline and you can't hit it, be upfront about it. But overall, work to the best of your ability. Sometimes be in a position of knowledge, you can know that you can cut corners or shortcuts. I'd advise against it. Just work to the best of your ability so that no one can question you after the fact. Yeah. And lastly, the most important one, I think, is make sure you're fairly compensated for your efforts. This is a skilled industry and not something you can't do without training. So bear that in mind when you're working. If your salary or day rate is not much better than a low skilled worker, then something isn't right there and it needs addressing. As Hugo Guerra said in his webinar, there needs to be a rate card system in the VFX industry to ensure that everyone's being paid fairly and not exploited or underpaid. And as freelancers, it's not like we've got a HR rep that we can speak to that will have our best interests to give us that level of support or protection. But there is an animation and VFX union branch of BEC2, and that was one of the first things I signed up to when setting up my company and becoming a freelancer, just to make sure that I had some support if I ever needed. I know that a base minimum rate card, industry rate card is for members is something high on the agenda, and they're going to look to make that happen, but the union generally needs members to support it, and that will make sure employers respect it if it ever does come about. One last thing to note about joining the union, because it's not half as scary as you think. Pretty much most industries have a union: doctors, teachers, train drivers, etc. Actually, most of the workers on TV and film productions in this country are part of a union. So that's your lighting technicians, your sound tech, your grip, your makeup artists, even as close as editors. And these are just, and we're just an extension of that pipeline. So I think it's only right that you two have your support and you join up and you've got somebody that, or at least a group of peers that can offer you that support if you ever need it. So that brings us to our conclusion, and apologies for being so long-winded. It's definitely tougher than I anticipated to do this with the time scale and the breadth of the topic, but I do aspire to make more concise videos in the future, like Hugo's Desk one day, but it's baby steps that I'm learning. Hopefully there was something in this that was of use to you and will help you in your journey. Best of luck to you all. So let's jump into this Q&A session, and by all means, here's my email. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you need be. And yeah, thanks for listening. Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you, Courtney. That was really insightful, really good talk. I hope everyone in the chat got a lot from it. So before we just jump into the Q&A quickly, I just wanted to shout out a few things that I was noticing. So people concerned that the recording, if they couldn't see it, there will be a recording of this available afterwards. So if there's anything you saw Courtney do or anything that you want us to reference later, it will be.
Or Shazam the audio.
Pardon?
Shazam the showreel audio.
Yeah, just do it. Yeah. So that'll be there. Also, for people in the chat that were helping to answer questions and follow on some interesting thoughts, again, that's really appreciated, because while it's fantastic having Courtney here, it's also fantastic having everyone else to provide their insights and provide their experience and expertise. So it's really good to see people sharing that knowledge, and this is what this is all predominantly about. Also for the Q&A, we're going to primarily focus on questions that are directed more to the idea of becoming a senior compositor and that topic. So we did see a few questions regarding some other things. We've tried to answer as many as we can just in the chat for ones that are a little bit off topic. But just know that we're going to try and focus primarily on senior comp stuff. All right, Courtney, you ready to answer some questions?
Yeah, sure. Let's where am I using this document to go through them, or are you gonna fire them at me and I'll just?
I'm gonna click this button and it's hopefully gonna pop up on the screen. So is that live for you at the moment?
It was, and it disappeared.
Yeah, I had the same thing also.
Okay. All right, good.
The question was what? So we'll try and improve it for the next one. But the question was, what skills would you recommend honing in on if you wanted to progress from mid to senior when working remotely from home?
You know what? So there was a few more bits in that presentation that I just had to cut out because it was just taking too long. One of the things, thinking back at it, that I really wish I kept in there was the external knowledge as a hard skill. Building up your external knowledge outside of your regular day-to-day work. So things like if you ever wanted to pick up a 3D package, there's a bunch of tutorials out there. There's free apps, Houdini and Blender. That's a good shout. Or Modo as well. Sorry, I'll throw that in there. Python. If you guys ever wanted to start learning Python, Code Academy. There's a great website to kind of talk through, show you some of the basic core skills of Python coding. Then there was color science. I really wanted to include a little bit in there so basically on Vimeo, Daniele Sirigasano, he does these great presentations on color management and how film light or the Baselight machine handles color and just some of the core concepts. I think it's a great kind of like resource to get around in, and he's quite good at explaining things and creating presentations, and it's easily digestible. And the last one was so it's color science. I think there was one more, but I can't remember it. But I'd say, if you ever wanted to learn something, cameras, that's it. Cameras, lenses, bokeh, vintage lenses. If you've got a camera at home that you've been sitting around with for a while, take it out, use it, test some stuff, find out what other lenses are doing, what kind of like characteristics of those lenses are doing, photography, cinematography, thanks Joe, that sort of stuff. That was the other thing that I was going to say. So I think those external knowledge, those kind of skill sets help you become a better compositor. So that'll be good to have as a string in your bow. Yeah, no, I think that makes complete sense. Okay, so looking at another one which was close to that, how is a senior prep artist, or how does a senior prep artist fit in compositing? Do they have enough knowledge already compared to a junior compositor? I've had to paraphrase a little bit. So I'll be honest with you. I mean, a prep artist. I've not ever worked with a prep artist, to be honest with you. I've worked with juniors that have prepped, but they can also composite as well. I'm guessing senior prep artists would be like, I don't know, doing the first part of the slap comps, I'd guess. I'd assume. Maybe somebody else can clear this up a bit better for me. But I would say if you are kind of combining elements and you've got a decent understanding on how Nuke as a software works, then there should be no reason why you can't be a junior compositor. I think there's some companies that have these rigid structures. If at some point, like I said in the talk, at some point you kind of have to look at it, and you have to look at your career and where you want to go and how much time you're dedicating to something to actually, say, am I getting what I want out of this? And if you are a senior prep artist and you're not given the responsibility to become a compositor, and that's your ultimate goal, you have to make that. That's a decision you probably have to make for yourself.
Yeah, no, I agree, actually. I mean, from my long time ago working, it was a case that senior prep artists definitely had a lot of the skills that you'd want from a compositor, but they just needed to round out some more integration, more of the finishing side of things. So as Courtney as like broadening your skill set and like having the drive to find that extra pieces, then you can get there, make that jump pretty effectively.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good point, Jen. That for the Python knowledge, Ben McEwen's webinar, I have that in my slide as well. But yeah, definitely have a look in on that, and if you're Python, something that you guys wanted to get into.
His newsletter is also really fascinating for getting some fantastic new updates on tools. I found that very useful for helping build my little cookbook also.
Nice, good stuff, good stuff.
Okay, let's have a look at Luciano's question. What's your opinion about the future of remote work and the work, how will it cross international borders?
So, funnily enough, I've always wanted, so yeah, like everybody, the remote working thing is always something that I've thought was a goal. And, you know, when one of the last projects that I was working on at the Foundry was Ethereum before I left, and I genuinely thought that would have been a game changer. I think that is where the industry is going. But again, you need the infrastructure and the backbone to kind of support that. At the moment, we're being forced to do remote working, and I think a lot of people are realizing that actually it's not as bad as we thought. So I think it's definitely a possibility that going forward, when everything is, you know, when the dust settles, more companies will be into remote working and offering that as an option, because at the end of the day, it's the artist, right? You kind of, the artist is the factor, not where they are or how, you know, what your location is in London or so forth. So I think it will change. The international borders thing is something that might be a bit more difficult. I think there's some things that will definitely can get, I mean, at the moment, a lot of stuff does get outsourced. So, you know, CG gets outsourced, roto work gets outsourced, even some kind of like prep work gets outsourced. So I think the international remote work will be happening, and it will just extend from where we're at now. Yeah, I'd like to see more international work being outsourced remotely, but again, I think the half the problem is privacy and people's fear of you know, encryption of data and whatnot, and being able to control those physical environments. So yeah, I would see a future where it definitely progresses. We're still pushing up against a lot of old structures, but obviously with what's going on now and everything that we're seeing, it's definitely going to develop, but I don't think it will happen quickly. Touching on Ethereum, now Alara, or was renamed Alara, that's definitely an area where, you know, Foundry are really interested in that space, and you know, it's not going away. It's something we're still keeping tabs on. In terms of making sure we're in touch with what the industry needs in the future. Exactly.
But you know, you see the improvement of work across the industry. Yeah,
exactly. And you know what? Sorry, that's a good point, Hugo. There are people out there that have been working internationally, remotely, and showing that it can be done. So, yeah, I think it's more a case of the industry to catch up. The artists and the individuals, they're all good to go and pretty much know what their limitations, what they can and can't do, and the limitations. It's more about the you know, the industry itself making those steps.
Okay, let's have a look at this question. Hello, is there any difference between matching directly the black point and white point between sources and doing the black point and white point lift gain matching? Or is it just different ways of finding the same results? Exactly,
it's just different ways of finding the same results. That's kind of why I had that slice tool in there, just to show you what the actual the knobs in the grade node were actually doing. So yeah, the black point and the white point is exactly the same as the lift and the gain slash multiplier. The gain and multiplier are exactly the same as well. But the reason why I personally would set the black and white point and then do the lift and gain separately is because the lift and gain stay locked to the source plate in terms of where I've sampled my colors. The black point and white point, I might need to change that. So having those as two separate operations, I can go in and readjust my black points or readjust my whites. So I think having those as two separate operations, or in your mind at least separating them out as two separate operations, is a bit more procedural. And yes, Tony Lyons does have a really good, thanks Nicola, Tony Lyons has a really cool tutorial on black matching and matching black points. He's got a gizmo as well, but it's more like all of these things. I think it's more about the concepts and understanding that sort of stuff rather than, you know, getting a gizmo that just does it for you and not really getting the reasons why.
Cool.
Courtney, could you repeat the color scientist videos you were mentioning earlier?
Daniele Sergasano. So it's Filmlight. It's Filmlight's Vimeo channel. If you go on their Vimeo channel, maybe
Perfect. I'll get the link.
Oh, you get the link. Yeah. So he's got one called Effective Color Management from Production to Distribution, and I think it's 2 parts. It's about an hour each, 45 minutes hour each. But then, you know, since then he's just gone and he's done so many the webinars or like the videos that you'll just get lost in a rabbit hole over there. But it's good. It's a good rabbit hole to get lost in.
Nice. Okay, so this question I thought was quite interesting. Do you think that the standard for a senior artist is dropping and expectations to progress from junior to senior are being fast-tracked?
That's an interesting one. I actually I couldn't call that because the senior artists that I work with, I think, are all of a high standard. So wherever that question's come from, maybe, you know, there's a bit of issues there, but I'll tell you what, across the board, what I have noticed, and this is just, you know, some of you guys might have just noticed this watching some of the Netflix shows on your TV, because there is more content out there and there's more demand. I don't think there's as many artists to kind of keep up with that, or skilled artists, or maybe the times are not as you're not getting enough time to turn around some of these shots to the best of their ability. So I would probably look at more the infrastructure around these artists rather than say the artists themselves, because I wouldn't know, but I definitely think there's a lot of content out there and not all of it is of the standard that you might have expected 5-10 years ago. So I think that's just a demand, and people probably are getting fast tracked, but that's just because the work is out there, it needs to get done. And if you've been in the company for X amount of time and you've got a bunch of those soft skills that I was talking about and maybe not so much of the hard skills, it's fine, we'll teach you the hard skills, just, you know, help us out kind of thing. So yeah, it depends on the company, but I wouldn't be surprised if that is happening in this current climate with everybody wanting content and high-end VFX in their work.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, touching on highlighting the hard skill, soft skill debate. Is you sometimes only see just the hard skills of things, or just the person trying to work, and you can't really appreciate what they do behind the scene to help accelerate not just themselves but the team around them. Exactly.
It's and you know, it's something that I kind of, you know, just been observing and taking it in, that I mean, take should I do this? Yeah, I'll say it. So take flame artists, for example. Yeah, back in the day, they're rock stars, and some of them are like a lot of them are super talented in, you know, with their tool, like, in terms of being a flame artist. But the first thing I noticed is that actually what they're bringing to the table is less about the software and being compositors with that software. It's more about how they handle a room of agency clients, you know, be able to relay ideas, translate information, be able to add creative input, mentoring. So it's all the other stuff. It's all the other stuff. The software is a small part of it, but the reason why they are held in such high regard, I think, is probably the stuff that is less to do with the software. So yeah, that was just something worth pointing. No. Yeah, no, definitely. Some of the people I've met who are the best artists are the ones that have those skills, and like you say, it's definitely develop them. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Okay, we'll try this one. For a VFX artist based in India, is it possible to get work in London or Vancouver? Is that I'm gonna assume that they're traveling, and yeah, I would. If they're traveling, I wouldn't. Sorry.
Not at the moment.
Right, yeah, exactly. Everything's on lockdown. Yeah, not now. But if they wanted to travel to London or Vancouver, why not, man? There's, like I said, there's so much work out there. I couldn't imagine why not. As long as you've got some sort of evidence or portfolio or show reels to kind of prove, show that you can do the work, I wouldn't see why not. If it's remote, if you're talking specifically about remote work, that might be a bit harder because there has to be a lot of trust and a lot of there's a bunch of barriers that hurdles that you'd have to get over in order to get people on board to kind of send work out remotely to you. So that the being a VFX artist remotely from India, or not just India specifically, but just outside of the hub of where the work is, might be a tougher challenge.
But I mean, you are seeing everywhere skilling up. Like everywhere is like the quality is raising faster and faster.
Oh yeah,
and it's that skill set applies universally. So
yeah, 100%. I would never say. No, matter of fact, there's a majority of the workforce in London is foreign internationals. There's a bunch of like, don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of British people, but work with German, load of Europeans, load of India, load of people from India, China, wherever. It's just the skill is a skill. That's what people want. Right? They don't really care about where you're, like the location or where you're from. I don't think.
Oh, I got a good question for you coming up next. Would you say that an in-depth knowledge of maths operations and color spaces is essential for becoming a senior?
Right. So I'll be honest. So my maths was never my thing at school. So maths operations, I would say the actual operations themselves, I mean, you need to have a good idea. You need to have a good understanding of, basic addition and multiplication and that sort of stuff. Yeah. But in-depth knowledge of maths operations like sine, tangents and, doing expressions, probably not. I don't think that, again, like I said, I think that kind of complicates stuff, and it might not be necessary. Color spaces, I do think is probably more important. Firstly, there's understanding the color spaces, but then there's also understanding the color science and the reason of either having a uniform or kind of like a uniformed color space so that things work correctly, or when you're going from one media color space to a destination and getting the most out of that information in the middle area. And the production, like I said, that video that Daniele done explains that quite well. But the color science and the color spaces stuff is more important, I think, probably than the math operations specifically. And again, not in depth. I'm not talking scientists in depth, but good understanding.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it feels like a lot of seniors and stuff that to me they're the problem solvers on a show, or can be.
Yeah.
And if you have that toolkit of knowing in-depth maths, then obviously it opens some windows for you to solve some certain problems that
100%.
someone else might not. But you can be a creative person who just focuses purely on the art, so to speak, but you'll find creative solutions there. So to me, It's more about finding your way to find solutions.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I mean, I've in my journey, I've met, I've met some Python wizards that are super talented. I've met, communicators that are super talented, creative artists that are super talented, and just, technical guys that are just super knowledgeable. But sometimes you might be, on a scale of 1 to 10, you might be 8, 9, or 10 in some areas, and 2, 3, 4 in others. And that's why I say it's a good balance of hard and soft skills. There's no point being an expert math operator and not have, or math operator, knowing math operations in depth, but then not knowing, camera photography or like how lenses react or something like that, so being as rounded as possible is the best way forward, I think.
Nice. Yeah, I'm going to speed through. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to start skipping some questions.
I think it's probably the last question, Chris. We're already hitting 15
Oh,
minutes
done.
over. It goes
Okay.
by fast.
All right. Yeah, it does. It does when you're having fun. All right. Yeah.
No worries. Well, thank you for everyone who sent questions. We'll answer one more, though it might be worth us collating some of the extra questions and seeing what we can provide some answers to afterwards.
We have some ideas about adding them to the Foundry community, so we're working on that right now.
Great. Okay, well, Jordan gets the last question then. For Courtney, more of a next level question. What additional skills would you recommend for senior compers making the jump to lead comp suit? The best ways to find an opening or opportunities in the VFX industry?
Yeah, that's interesting. What additional skills would you recommend senior compers making the jump from lead comp soup? So lead comp soup, or a lead or a comp soup, I think is more of, now I think you're going into more the business side of things. So, you know, you're looking at budgeting, you're looking at scheduling, you're looking at you know, hiring people and what kind of people you'd want to work with you. Then you're looking at troubleshooting on set, and you know, you're kind of liaising more with production. You know, you're kind of you're going into more the business side of things. So all right, so this is probably the best way of describing it. So if mid-level or mid-weight is more the artist, like you're kind of focusing on the technicalities of being an artist, and if senior kind of gets into more the soft skills, the management side of things, I think the lead and the comp soup, you kind of need to start going into more of the business, understood the business side of the industry. I think that's where you kind of need to start understanding the bigger picture of why things are being done, even just your makeup of your team. Maybe you need one senior and 3 mids and 4 juniors, or 2 juniors, you know, that kind of stuff. I think that's when you're getting into the lead and comp soup kind of aspect side of things. And and the best ways to find the open opportunities in the VFX. So probably finding a company that if you're a senior and you're going to a company, tell them your aspirations and say, look, I want to become a supervisor, or want to get on-set supervision experience or whatever. I'm pretty sure they would, you know, if they're willing to, if they really want you, they'll help you make that transition. Otherwise, it might be jumping on LinkedIn, trying to find small projects, small commercials, anything that you can kind of take on yourself and maybe lead as yourself individually, as like a small team, like Hugo has done, for example. He's probably a good example of somebody that's just gone on and, you know, taken his skills and built up his own company. So when you're a senior and you're skilled, that is always an option as well. If the company isn't willing to nurture you and take you on that career progression, there are other avenues. There's more than one way to skin a cat. LinkedIn is always a great resource for finding people, and you know, there's a bunch of agencies and so forth that you can help reach out to and offer your services.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Courtney. That talk and the Q&A was fantastic to hear. And
good.
Thank you to everyone in the chat who had joined, answered questions, just hung out with us.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, thanks everyone. We have another webinar on Thursday with our Nuke TDs out there, and there's also another webinar coming up in 2 weeks about how to start a small studio with using Nuke Studio as your backbone. Courtney just distracted me. I'm like, the SIP.
Yeah, it's going down.
I should try and grab it. I should make one of those videos.
Can I just start one thing before we go? I have to say, Courtney, the GIFs and the images you used throughout the presentation were fantastic.
Thanks, man. Bro, honestly, it was keeping me entertained all night, so I appreciate it, you know. Thanks.
Well, thank you everyone for giving up your time, whether it's your morning, your afternoon, or your evening. We appreciate you. It helps us stay connected to our community. We miss you all. We're used to traveling and being there. So thank you, Courtney, for this awesome presentation. And as Chris mentioned, stay safe. Stay creative, stay connected, and if there's anything Foundry could do, just reach out to us. We're doing our best to respond to everything. So feel free to drop us a note. info@foundry.com, marketing@foundry.com. We are here and we are listening.
All right. Thanks, guys. Much appreciated. And thanks to the Foundry as well for putting these together. Much appreciated. Great.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.